transcend, cold grounds for divorce. Whoa.
I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV Velocities in Music. Today, folks, I'm very excited to review Elbow's fourth album that came out in 2008, the Seldom Seen Kid. Elbow, pretty much the coolest band in music right now, if you ask these two guys. Because here's the deal. Here, I want to tell you a story. I really like Wolf Parade. They're like one of my favorite bands, right? So one of my favorite tracks is Grounds for Divorce, track 3 on Apologies to the Queen Mary. And I was listening to that one day, and Tom was like, oh yeah, whenever I think of Grounds for Divorce, it makes me want to listen to Grounds for Divorce by Elbow. So he played me Grounds for Divorce by Elbow. Hands down one of the best tracks I've ever heard, ever. Just incredible songwriting ability, and every time I listen to Elbow, from Asleep in the Back to their next two albums, which I'm a little less familiar with.
Yeah, me too, actually.
And then the 2011 release that was just monumental. Tom and I both gave it 100 because we loved it so much. Build a Rocket Boys. It was our highest scoring album of 2011, although it didn't end up to be our favorite album of the year.
Number 2, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It was definitely, you know, an incredible album that we loved. The Seldom Seen Kid, this is just going to be an Elbow rant fest, because I really do think that Elbow is one of the just most forward-thinking, talented bands, most consistent bands out there, and in true British fashion, really just making good music for the sake of making good music.
They have never done anything remotely bad.
No.
I mean, the 3 albums of theirs that I know really well are 3 of my favorite albums of all time.
Which just means when we get to, you know...
Sleep in the Back?
Well, no.
You mean when we get to the other
Cast
two?
of Thousands and
Leaders of the Free World. Yeah.
When we get to those albums, we're going to love them even more, too.
Because I've listened to them each a few times.
Yeah,
I just haven't gotten into them as much. But I mean, everything else I've heard of theirs, and Seldom Seen Kid is no different, is just some of the best songwriting and just some of the like most controlled sound I've ever heard. I mean, these guys, it sounds like to me when I listen to this album and really any of their stuff, but we will try to get more specifically into Seldom Seen Kid, not just about how awesome Elbow is in general. It's difficult though. But when you talk about this band, I mean, it just seems like every album of theirs you listen to, it's like they just had a clear goal in mind, what they were setting out to make with their music, and they nail it every time. And this album has everything. This album has everything from the softer, more sentimental stuff to the rockin' stuff. I mean, songs like The Bones of You and Grounds for Divorce, they rock the hell out. But the whole album's not like that. I mean, the whole album isn't like anything. Yet it still flows so much. There's so many intricacies. The production is perfect. What's cool is there'll be some really, really shiny, really present, smooth-sounding aspects of the track. And then at the same time, there'll be some kind of lo-fi, sometimes noisy, kind of covered up parts of the track that act more as mood enhancers, more as layers and backdrops for these pieces. And so sometimes they feel more like compositions than rock band songwriting. You know,
and Elbow describes themselves as prog without the solos. They're much deeper than that, because there's a ton of piano and strings, so there's a lot of pop influence too, but these guys are doing something that it's hard to describe their sound because it's so original sounding. It's so artful. And every one of these songs, as Tom said, is very different. And therefore it's so lush, it's so versatile in its track listing and in sound that you have to listen to it over and over and over again to really get a feel for it. Now, the biggest barrier to entry, this is true of Seldom Seen Kid and any Elbow release, is Guy Garvey's vocals. He is very thickly British, and he emotes like you wouldn't believe. Now, if you can deal with that and kind of get through it, get used to it, like like all vocalists. I remember the first time I heard Led Zeppelin, I was like, oh man, this guy, he's a fairy. He just sings so high. And then I was 9 at the time. And then I fell in love with it, but that's, you get exposed to these things that you end up liking them over time. It's been like that with every vocalist ever, even Harvey Milk. For me, Elbow and Guy Garvey are the same way. If you can get through that, you'll find that one of the best aspects about the Seldom Seen Kid is how Guy Garvey is able to just emote and just control intensity. the contrast between and dynamic contrast between the soft parts of every song and the extremely loud parts of every song is so vast.
Which they set you up for right away in Starlings when you're not expecting it, and then BAM! These horn blasts that are just ridiculously loud.
And the beautiful thing about putting that in the first track is that is the thesis statement for this album. This album is all about contrast, and I think that is one thing hugely missing for most of the music coming out today is contrast, dynamic contrast. It's what makes music interesting, because when you, I mean, the ability to go from really loud to really soft and pull it off flawlessly so where it's totally smooth is just something that I think a lot of artists could work on. And I think that, you know, when you look at tracks like Mirrorball and Grounds for Divorce, those are some of the best tracks I've ever heard.
Yeah. When I listen to those two songs in a row, that's what I think. I'm like, I don't know if I've heard songwriting next to each other that's this good.
Right.
But also that different. I mean, it's just masterfully done.
Right.
There's no other way to put it.
Tom, I gotta say, without ranting too much more, I'm underscoring this by going, if I were to tell you, go the 92 that I said I was gonna go, I'm gonna go 95.
You know what?
I really loved this album.
I'm gonna go up to 97.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go a little higher than that. Because the more I talk about it and I think about these tracks, this album is just so damn good.
It's hugely addictive.
Yeah.
And one thing that I found kind of interesting is I really enjoy like the first 4 or 5 tracks. And then I feel like an Audience for the Pope track 5, Weather to Fly, the Loneliness of a Tower Crane Driver, and then The Fix. I feel like those 4 tracks kind of they're not bad by any means, but they're not as strong as the first 4. So this album does kind of have a little bit of sag, but then it kicks it right back into gear because Some Riot, track 9, One Day Like This, and Friend of Ours to close the album is just some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard. So this album finishes strong, it starts strong and finishes strong, and I think that that's just great. I do think that Build a Rocket Boy is a bit more consistent, which is why I think it got a higher score from both of us.
Yeah.
But I really do love this album. What's your guys' favorite Elbow album? Is Elbow a band that you're into? I don't hear a lot about Elbow.
Me neither, and I don't know why.
Right.
I don't know why these guys aren't trouncing like Coldplay and all the other British bands right now. I don't
honestly,
get it.
I'm more interested in what Elbow's next album is than Radiohead. I'm willing to say it.
Yeah.
It's blasphemous, I know. I'm willing to go there. If you guys are big Elbow fans, we'd love to get in a discussion with you about your favorite parts of Elbow. So let us know what you think at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. If you haven't listened to Elbow, definitely jump into this album, Asleep in the Back. Either of those 2 albums would be great starting points. Also, let us know what you think on Twitter. Velocities in Music is twitter.com/VIMTV or facebook.com/VIMTV. And that's where we do most of our talking with our fans. You guys mean a lot to us. Please leave us a request. We'd like to get you guys involved in this process a little bit further in building our schedule. So please do that. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.